Welcome to this deep dive. We've got a fascinating mix of sources all about the food industry and specifically Associated British Foods.
ABF, right? Yeah.
Exactly, ABF. We're going to kind of dig into what makes them tick, what makes their strategy so different, especially in a world where, like, everyone's tastes are changing and the whole world is, well, a little unpredictable.
Yeah, it's a bit of a wild ride out there.
But for sure. And one of your sources, it jumps right into this, the sheer size of the food industry, almost $1 trillion in the US alone.
Wow.
I know, right? And then there's this whole trend, like everyone's going crazy for organic and sustainable food.
Yeah, and it's growing so fast.
16% growth every year between 2015 and 2020. It's nuts. So is this here to stay or is it, just a fad?
Well, I think it's connected to something bigger. People are way more aware of climate change these days, and they want to make choices that are good for the planet.
Makes sense.
It's not just about eating healthy anymore. It's about the impact our food has on the whole world.
Absolutely. And your source even mentions 3D printed food. 3D printed food, can you imagine?
So it sounds like science fiction, right?
It really does. And AI creating totally new foods. Is this for real or is it just hype?
It's more real than you might think. These technologies are already out there. 3D food sales are projected to jump 20% by 2025.
Wow. So the big question is ABF, are they going to jump on this train or are they going to stick with what they know?
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they adapt, right? Because if they want to stay in the game, they have to keep up with all this new stuff, especially in an industry as fast-moving as food.
Totally. Because let's be real, millennials and Gen Z, they're doing most of their grocery shopping online these days.
Online, yeah. They basically live online.
It's all about convenience, right? So if ABF wants to win them over, they've got to have a strong online presence, too.
Oh, absolutely. This whole online food sales thing, it's a total game changer. Yeah. ABF can't just ignore it. Yeah. They need to figure out how to make that online experience really smooth, really appeal to these tech-savvy shoppers.
So let's talk about ABF, who they are. They're not your average corner store, that's for sure. We're talking 5 different sectors: grocery, sugar, agriculture, ingredients, and then get this, retail.
Retail, wow, that's a lot of ground to cover.
I know, right? And they own brands I never would have guessed. Like Yumi's in Australia, they make those dips and plant-based stuff. And then there's Alfez. They've got all the Middle Eastern products.
See, that's smart, right? They're tapping into all these different cultural tastes, these local preferences.
They're everywhere.
They've got this global presence, but they also really understand, what people want in each specific market.
And then they've got Primark, which is huge in Europe, their fashion line.
Oh, yeah, Primark. I love Primark.
It's amazing how they're juggling all these different businesses under one roof, What's their secret?
I think it's about finding those common threads, creating this synergy between these businesses that seem so different.
Yeah, like using their strengths in one area to boost another.
Exactly.
So one of your sources goes into ABF strategies, and the first one they mention is differentiation.
Differentiation. So, how do they stand out from the crowd?
Exactly. How does that work for a company as big and diverse as ABF?
Well, look at their grocery brands. Each one is super focused, offering these unique products you won't find anywhere else. Their Raja brand. They specialize in Asian and Afro-Caribbean spices.
It's smart. They're catering to these very specific needs.
Exactly. They're not trying to be everything to everyone. They're finding their niche.
And then you've got Primark, which is all about affordable fashion.
Yeah, they've totally nailed that fast fashion market.
They're hitting both ends of the spectrum. It's pretty impressive.
It all comes down to knowing your audience, right? What makes them tick, what makes them open their wallets.
For sure. And your source also mentions this thing called vertical integration.
Vertical what?
Integration. Basically, it means they control almost everything from the raw materials to the finished product sitting on the shelf.
Oh, wow. So they're not just making the food, they're involved in every step of the process.
Pretty much. And that gives them so much control over costs, over quality, and ultimately their profits.
Smart move.
Mm-hmm.
That makes it way harder for new companies to compete too.
Exactly. Because ABF already has their foot in the door at every stage.
It's a brilliant strategy. They can operate way more efficiently, way more effectively.
And then, of course, their acquisitions. They're always snapping up new companies.
Always growing, right.
They bought Ilovo Sugar Africa, Fatexia in France, and Acetum in Italy.
See, these acquisitions, they're not just about getting bigger. They're about getting smarter.
Expanding their reach?
Exactly. And diversifying what they offer. Each acquisition brings something new to the table,
Yeah.
right? Helps them adapt, helps them stay ahead of the curve.
It's like they're constantly evolving.
They have to. The food industry never sits still.
So true. It's not all smooth sailing, though, right? Your sources also bring up some of the roadblocks ABF's been hitting,
Yeah, the world kind of threw him a curveball with, well, everything going on.
like Brexit,
Exactly. Brexit, the war in Ukraine, it's all shaking things up.
big time.
Mhm.
And all this uncertainty, it's really messed with raw material costs, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it's definitely impacted ABF. Like, their stock prices took a tumble in 2022.
Ouch. It just shows you even these giant companies, they're not immune to, global events.
It's a connected world out there.
For sure. And then there's inflation, like everything's getting more expensive.
Ugh, tell me about it.
Your source mentioned ABF's been trying to source more stuff within the UK.
To avoid those extra costs from Brexit.
Right. But are they considering like raising prices? I mean, that's got to be on the table, right?
They are, but it's a tough call. If they raise prices too much, they risk, losing customers, especially those Primark shoppers
Right.
who are all about those bargains.
It's a delicate balance.
Got to find that sweet spot.
And speaking of Primark, they've got a decent online presence for their clothes, but your source pointed out that ABF's kind of lagging behind in the online grocery game.
Online groceries. Yeah, they're missing out on a huge opportunity there.
Especially with, millennials and Gen Z doing all their shopping online.
They got to adapt or they'll get left behind.
Because that online grocery market, it's exploding.
It's the future, really.
So what's next for ABF? One of your sources suggests they really need to embrace, like, all the new tech, especially in the alternative protein space.
Alternative protein, so like plant-based stuff, lab-grown meat, all that.
Yeah. It's a growing market, and it seems like ABF could really make a splash there.
It makes sense, right? People are more aware of, the impact of meat production on the planet.
And with their track record of acquisitions, maybe they could just, like, buy up some companies that are already doing cool stuff in that space.
Oh, absolutely. That's a quick way to get a foothold in a new market.
And then there's e-commerce. They really got to step up their game there. Your source suggests a direct-to-consumer strategy could be huge.
Direct-to-consumer. Interesting.
So instead of relying on supermarkets and all that, they could just sell straight to people online.
That's a bold move.
But it could really pay off, right? They could build, like, stronger relationships with their customers, get more control over their brand.
Yeah, and potentially make more money by cutting out the middleman.
Exactly. It seems like a win-win.
It's all about, keeping up with the times, finding that balance between what's worked in the past and what's going to work in the future.
So looking at all these sources, ABF's kind of at a crossroads, right?
Yeah, they've done amazing things, but they're also facing some big challenges.
It's a fascinating case study.
The decisions they make now, they're going to shape their future for years to come.
Will they stick with what they know, or will they, embrace all this new stuff and really shake things up?
Only time will tell.
And for you, our listener, this deep dive has hopefully given you a better understanding of, well, all the crazy stuff happening in the food industry.
It's a wild ride, that's for sure.
And ABF is right in the thick of it.
It's just the tip of the iceberg, really. There's so much more to explore, so much more to learn.
So keep digging, keep asking questions, and most importantly, keep enjoying your food.
Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about.
We've talked a lot about, the business side of things, but it's easy to forget this is all about food.
Yeah.
Something that connects us all.
It's more than just, like, fuel, right? It's culture, it's enjoyment, it brings people together.
It's about, the bigger picture, where our food comes from, who makes it, how it impacts the environment, all of that.
It's all connected.
Right.
Every choice we make, at the grocery store, at a restaurant, it has these ripple effects.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive,
Yeah.
what are some key takeaways you'd like our listener to, to walk away with?
Well, first, don't be afraid to question things. Just because we've always done something a certain way doesn't mean it's the right way.
Be open to new ideas.
Exactly. New technologies, new ways of thinking about food.
The future of food is being shaped right now. We all have a part to play.
And second, knowledge is power, right? The more you know about the food industry, the better choices you can make.
So read up on it, watch documentaries.
Yeah, maybe even visit a local farm, get your hands dirty, really experience where your food comes from.
Love that. Become an active participant, not just a passive consumer.
And lastly, don't underestimate your own voice. Share what you learn. Speak up about what matters to you. Support companies that align with your values.
Even small actions can have a big impact.
It's about making conscious choices, right? Voting with your dollar, supporting a more sustainable, more just food system.
Imagine a world where food is Not just delicious and healthy, but also sustainable, ethical, accessible to everyone.
That's the kind of future we can create if we all work together.
That's a powerful thought, and I think this depth dive has given us the tools to start making that happen.
Now it's up to you, dear listener. What choices will you make? What changes will you push for? What kind of food future will you help build?
That's something to think about. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of food. Until next time, happy eating.